Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator.
Thank you very much. Senator Little.
Thank you. Once again, I would like to talk a little bit about affordable housing. We know that there are many types of affordable housing, but in my district I have, and other districts throughout the state as well, we have something that's very common, the use of mobile homes as an affordable option. And as you know, mobile homes do not age well, and many times they can't be disposed of, they deteriorate, and it becomes a real issue. While some are in a community park, we have a lot of them which the person owns the land, has a well and a septic, but the home just is really not adequate, especially if they're not on a concrete foundation, and especially with our winters, although this one isn't bad. However, several years ago, there was a program where they would fund the removal of the mobile home and the building of a stick-built house, not large, but a stick-built house that would take the place of that mobile home, reconnect to the well and the sewer, and really provide better housing. And my question is if there is some way that we can devise a fund that could be used throughout the state for this type of help in assisting people to have a better home to live in.
Senator, it's a great question. You're exactly right. Mobile homes are a part of our housing stock. It's unrecognized often, but I think the number of mobile homes, and I may get this wrong, is something like 1 million in the state. It's an extraordinarily high number. And it does create, the nature of the housing creates some particular issues, as you said. You can't resell a mobile home once you've lived in it. So once you bought it, you own it, and then it's effectively...
It's downhill.
You bet. It is also the case, as you said, that the location of the mobile homes are often, in questionable circumstances, they're often to be found, for example, in floodplains, or they have inadequate footing or foundations or whatever. When I was running the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, we had a number of particularly sticky issues dating back to Irene and Lee with mobile homes because of exactly that kind of problem. I think a program that I don't know what was done several years ago, but our staff can research it, and then we can talk. I'd be delighted to talk to you and your staff about resuscitating some assistance for them.
Thank you, because there does seem to be some money that is, for incentive programs that's not a little bit flexible.
Sure.
It would be a great program if we could start it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Go ahead.
Senator.
The Assembly, I believe, is done with their questioning, so we'll go to Senator Valmanent Montgomery. Sorry, Valmanent. There she is.
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator.
Forgive me, this question may have already been asked. I apologize for being late. That was obviously with the children in the well.
Not at all.
I want to ask you, we talk a lot about the need for affordable housing. That is huge. And homelessness and all of those issues related to not having housing. However, the largest stock of absolutely affordable housing that we have, perhaps in the whole state, is within NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority. And of course, last year we did have $100 million allocated for the purpose of attempting to address some of the capital needs of NYCHA. We've been told by the chairwoman at NYCHA that a huge part of the problem that they have experienced is related to the fact that they need new roofing in most of those developments. And because of the damage that has occurred based on the lack of the problems with roofs, all of the other issues stem from that. So unless we do the new roofs, we can't expect that other capital requirements will work. So I have two parts to my question. One is, what did happen to the $100 million? Was that actually delivered to NYCHA, and did it support the capital needs based on the identification of the chairwoman and her staff? And that's number one. And two, are we in the state of New York, through your agency, are we looking to create a funding stream that would support NYCHA? Because after all, it is the number one supply of affordable housing, really affordable housing, in the city of New York and probably across the state. So my question is, what are we doing to establish some way for the state to make sure that there is an ongoing capital support for the public housing in our state?
Senator, thank you for your questions. We have spent some time today talking about NYCHA, but it makes sense that we would spend time talking about NYCHA. As you say, within New York City, it is, NYCHA is a third of all public housing nationwide. And in New York City, it's an enormous source of affordable housing for hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. So it should be a focus of what we talk about when we talk about affordable housing. With that said, specifically to your question about the $100 million from last year's budget,
Yes.
the first $40 million of that has already been allocated to NYCHA for security purposes. And by security, I mean very specific building by building expenditures on specific security measures that I had the opportunity to review at a meeting with Ms. Olatoya and her staff several months ago. That work is underway, has been announced and is underway being overseen jointly by the Dormitory Authority of the State, DASNY, and NYCHA. And my understanding is they are working closely to get it out, get the security measures in place very quickly, because obviously that's a critical need. The second piece of that $100 million is included in what's called the Capital Revitalization Plan. That was the term for the overall $100 million. That plan, the rest of it is being reviewed at the Department of Budget, our Department of Budget. And my understanding is that approval of it is imminent, and then the rest of it will be released for the kind of work that between NYCHA and I assume DASNY that the first $40 million was subject to. And it'll be for, again, critical needs that NYCHA has and others have identified for us. As far as an ongoing state capital funding, an ongoing source of state capital funding for NYCHA, it's not traditionally been, funding of NYCHA is awfully complex. NYCHA's funding from the federal government has waxed and waned. NYCHA's funding from other sources has waxed and waned. NYCHA has enormous capital needs. They also have an enormous amount of money that comes to them from a variety of sources. And I know that while the staff at NYCHA is dedicated and works very hard, we need to make sure that, among other things, they're spending that money wisely and efficiently, the money that they have access to wisely and efficiently. I should say that I don't want to lose sight of the importance of that $100 million that we talked about earlier with Assemblyman Wright and others. You all made that available to NYCHA, and it wasn't roofs ultimately that it was spent on, but it was, NYCHA is where people live and work. There are lots of important things about those buildings that aren't roofs. And I know NYCHA's got an extensive and very aggressive roof repair plan that they have undertaken. And I think you all were wise enough to make sure, and others, the governor, to make sure that there were other aspects of NYCHA's needs that were met with that $100 million.
Thank you, Commissioner. All due respect, security is not capital, and security doesn't take care of what appears to be a major problem throughout the system. So I just want to register my concern with you. And also that obviously a system of this magnitude serving hundreds of thousands of families, and I represent a number of housing, including Red Hook East, Red Hook West, which suffered tremendous problems based on the storm. We really need to be able to create a sustained way of making sure that that housing stays available and is upgraded as needed. And I would hope that we could begin to talk about ways in which the state can work with the city and with the federal funding streams to make sure that NYCHA is sustainable for the people that it was built for and that it serves. And I must say to you, when I go into the buildings in my district and I see the great degree of disrepair and the needs there, the molding and the leaks and some of the units that are not even usable because they are so bad. It really amazes me that we have gone so many years ignoring this particular source of housing while we have exploded, especially in my district and other parts of the city as well, exploded in this new development that we are subsidizing nonetheless while we ignore the NYCHA housing. So I hope that we can work together with you in coming up with a plan, you and the governor, of course, with a plan that addresses this tremendous need in our city and our state.
I thank you for your comments, Senator, and I share your concerns about the state of disrepair in many of NYCHA's buildings. There are no shortage of creative financial proposals that have been put out there. Most recently, I know by Comptroller Stringer the other day, and I think all of those have to be examined in the context of the importance that NYCHA plays in New York City. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Our next speaker is Senator Liz Krueger.
Good afternoon. To continue. I know you answered a question for Senator Rivera that you did not believe that inserting the PACB into the approval process for bond cap money would delay. But you actually couldn't control that if we had this rule, because the PACB rules are that there are 3 voting members, and any one saying no means it doesn't go through. So just for the record, the governor's departments couldn't guarantee that this would not delay, because last time I checked, you don't get to determine whether the majority leader of the Senate or the Speaker of the Assembly decide to vote yes or no in PACB votes. So is that am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. There was lots of discussion before about the commitment for affordable housing units and discussion in your testimony about supportive housing units, and we're all delighted that the state is making these commitments. And you explicitly said in your testimony that the 6,000 supportive housing units in 5 years, there's actually $2.6 billion in the budget for new units. So I'm delighted that you spoke about those. But the governor also in his State of the State spoke about a 15-year commitment for 20,000 total supportive units. Because we work on an annual budget basis here, what can you do to ensure that this commitment is actually guaranteed going forward? Because I don't want to speak for the governor, but I don't think mathematically he will be the governor in 15 years. You and I probably won't be here. So I'm just... Danny will be here.
Assemblyman Farrell will be here.
I was just saying myself, and I shouldn't speak for you either, Commissioner.
I'm disappointed to find out I'm not going to be
You've
here.
only been here
years.
7. Okay, I won't be here.
All right.
Okay, fine. How do we sort of somehow codify or make explicit that there is a 15-year plan for these 20,000 units? In the past, we had these New York agreements. I mean, is there a plan for another one? Is there another model to assure this money and commitment goes forward?
Senator, it's a great question. I think that, first of all, the good news is that the next 5 years, which it's call it 5 years, but it's 5 years of a development cycle, whatever that actually ends up being, is fully funded. And I should point out that that's both on the capital and on the operating services side. Although that's not my agency, it is the fact that that's as you know, that's a critical piece of the development of supportive housing. So we're looking out now several years of need that we think that we can meet. Beyond that, as you said, the out years, it's the governor's commitment. He said it. I work for a governor who I've known, perhaps not as long as you have, but I've known him for a long time, and he is committed to making sure that as we get closer to that out year period, we'll be reviewing. I suspect what we'll be doing is reviewing, or my agency will be reviewing what we've already developed based on the work that we did from this budget, reassessing every year using the data that we get in from the continuum of care and other sources, and looking forward many more years, continually doing a look forward to see what we need. And if, in years 7, 5, or 6, or whatever it is, we see that, it's time to start thinking about that next period, living up to the, putting in explicit, in a new budget, something to meet the governor's commitment from this year, that's what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. And finally, lots of people have talked about the TPU and the value so many of us representing New York City see in that. So there was concern raised by one of my colleagues that TPU goes on fishing expeditions and there's still too many delays in the Office of Rent Administration. Am I wrong when I assume that what the TPU does is look at patterns of abuse through the Office of Rent Administration complaints, and now hopefully through the Tenant Harassment Task Force that's being, I guess, jointly carried out by your department, HPD, and I believe the Attorney General's office? So am I wrong to believe that actually there is coordination to try to make sure we're going after sort of big picture bad players and address individual people's complaints, even though I would agree with my colleagues, we're still too slow on the individual complaints as well?
I would say you're not wrong, because I would never want to say you're wrong about anything.
It's okay. I said you were wrong already.
That's
today.
fine. But I'm sort of learning what the relationship
He's in
is.
the hot seat.
I can take it.
I would. I bet. I would have. I would say you said that they look for patterns of abuse. I would say they look for patterns. What TPU does is they look for patterns, whatever they are. They look for example, they do audits on blocks of apartments. They'll take, a tax abatement program, to take one example, a real example. They'll take a tax abatement program that should have been matched, should have matched benefits with rent stabilization, rent stabilized apartments, and they'll look to see from year to year whether those apartments, which they know which apartments they are, stayed in the system. It's not abuse, it's just a fact. They're there, they're not there. If they're not there and it looks like it's a pattern, why weren't they there? And at some point you start digging and you find that, yeah, they should have stayed in there, and then eventually you get to a result, which is the one that we had a couple of times recently, where you get large blocks of apartments that move back into the rent stabilized system. It's an audit. It's certainly not a fishing expedition. It's a review of data that happens on a blinded basis. Is there coordination with other aspects, other parts of state government or local government? There's coordination in the sense that they serve similar functions, and sometimes they'll sit side by side, but really the folks at ORA have very specific and distinct responsibilities. They are responsible for evaluating, sometimes tenant complaints, but really evaluating requests from landlords that come in for rent, for rental increases. And as you've talked about, or others have talked about, much of ORA's work goes to assessing the need, going through the painstaking labor of reviewing receipts and so forth, and then providing tenants with a due process to contest or agree with those requests. It's a very different kind of work than what TPU does, which is proactive and investigative. We do cooperate as members of the task force, as you said, the Tenant Harassment Task Force with the Attorney General's office and the city HPD, and there it's a lot more straightforward. We all have the same mission. We're arm in arm, and we cooperate.
And just quick last question, because I see zero. The State Controller's Office had done an audit showing a 14-month delay in responding on Office of Rent Administration complaints. Have you been able to improve that number since that audit?
Senator, the audit came out, I think, before I got here. The audit period was substantially before even the audit came out, as is the pattern in such audits. I've reviewed the audit carefully, and we have spent a tremendous amount of time on the internal processes, I would say some of the mechanisms of which led to the problems that were identified in the audit. I will come back to your office with some sense of whether we're making progress, but I can tell you that I'm not going to sit here next year and the year after and tell you that we haven't made efforts and that we haven't made progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And so I'm batting cleanup, I believe, but, and I do have several questions, so I hope people bear with me, but I think we
Please.
need to be transparent on behalf of the people of New York State, as you know. I wanted to follow up on Assemblyman Fitzpatrick's questions about the mortgage insurance fund. And as you know, under the governor's proposal and the Article 7 language, the governor would utilize $150 million in surplus MIF funds, which is a $25 million increase over last year. And you touched on this. I'm not an expert in mortgage insurance or anything like that either. As you pointed out, you aren't. But you do feel confident that it won't affect the state's credit rating. Is that true?
It's the mortgage insurance fund actually has its own credit rating, and the answer is
All right,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, the MIF's credit rating.
No, it's fine, and the answer is yes. We work closely with the credit rating agencies actually throughout the year to understand carefully not only what they think about the work that has been done, but what they think about the MIF's current fiscal position. And then I think that what happens is you try out various scenarios on them and assess whether they think that what we're proposing to do or might propose to do would have an impact on the credit rating.
No, and I appreciate that careful analysis. How much do you think is available as a surplus overall through the MIF funds?
Well, the Article 7, I think, is the amount
The full
in the Article
amount?
7, yeah, is the amount that's available.
Okay. You know what's really helpful to us is the Senate goes through our analysis of the governor's budget. Any information that you have, a report on that, would be very beneficial, I believe, for the Senate, but probably the Assembly too, as we evaluate this particular initiative.
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. That would be very, very helpful. I'm glad that Senators Bonasic and Montgomery asked about NYCHA. And obviously, there's been a lot of concerns about safety and security to the point where, crime issues. We had 2 little children stabbed in an elevator by someone who was mentally ill, who had fallen through the cracks, not gotten the mental health services that person needed. So those are big issues. And so I've heard you say, and I'm glad to hear it, for security purposes, there's been $40 million invested by the state to tackle some of those issues. And you also talked about the fact that you have a capital revitalization plan and the approval is imminent. And so I'm happy to hear that NYCHA is making progress, because I think all the legislators are concerned about some of the fraud, waste, abuse that has gone on in the system. And as a result of that, the tenants, the people, are being impacted in a very negative way, and they're suffering. So I want to point out, though, in the 2016 enacted budget, when the legislature appropriated that $100 million in J.P. Morgan settlement funds for NYCHA, the language says that no money shall be dispersed until the Commissioner of the New York State Division of Housing and Community Renewal, in consultation with the New York City Housing Authority Chair, has developed a capital revitalization plan for the use of such funds, and such plan has been approved by the Director of the Division of Budget and submitted to the Speaker and Minority Leader of the Assembly and the temporary President and Minority Leader of the Senate. So I was wondering if that plan's been submitted.
So that's the plan, Senator, whose approval is with the Department. That's with the Department of Budget right now, and whose approval is imminent. That's the $100 million capital revitalization.
Right, but has it been submitted to the legislature?
Not yet. I think it's submitted. My understanding is that it's submitted once the Department of Budget reviews it. So
Okay,
again,
so we look forward.
Exactly so.
We'll look forward to seeing that then. Thank you. I was really glad, just switching gears, to hear your support of the Rural Preservation Program and the Neighborhood Preservation Program. And as you know, those are very vital programs. And for the rural piece, especially upstate, that might be the only entity that does economic development for some of our smaller communities. And I'm so glad to see that I was very happy last year when we enacted a budget that was a 3-year plan, because oftentimes we go through a process during the budget where maybe the funding's been cut for such programs, and the legislature, again, I believe, whether you're Democrat, Republican, in the Assembly or in the Senate, thinks very highly of the MPP and the RPP programs. And so I'm glad to see that it's funded, because of the impact that it has on people's lives across the state, again, in a very positive way. HCR works very hard, and you have really good staff. However, there has been some glitches in the disbursement of funds, and I was hoping you could give a status update, because, you know, we hear from the agencies around the state, because they operate on shoestring budgets, oftentimes they have to go out and get bridge funding in order to be able to meet their payroll, for example, or whatever project they're working on. So I was wondering how that process is going now. Have the glitches been worked out? Is the funding going out in a timely manner?
Senator, with respect to any specific issues, obviously I'd have to have my staff follow up with yours so we make sure that any kinks in specific, you know, that we iron out any specific funding issues. We certainly don't want it to be the case that, as you said, these groups who are really the only source of local assistance are placed at financial risk. I would say my experience since I got here 7 months ago, as you said, is that the staff, and it's particularly the OCR staff headed by Chris Leo, are terrific at what they do. They are very, very dedicated to the rural needs of the state. And I've seen, I guess, part at this point of a cycle of grants and awards, and it seems to my eye to have gone relatively smoothly. There's certainly no unintended delays, and no complaints of delay have made their way to my office, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist, and I would welcome the opportunity to work with you and your staff on that.
It would be great to get a status update, and also for Senator Little to be able to have that information as chair of the Housing Committee, because, and I have to say, again, as former chair, the staff has been very responsive and very good and would meet with me, and I'm sure that they'll be meeting with her, but we have members from all over the state that are very concerned about those issues, because they hear, as you know, we get constituent cases in our
Absolutely.
offices. We hear from our constituents, and that was a concern. So thank you for the information on that.
Absolutely.
Switching gears to the Rural and Urban Community Investment Fund, which I am thrilled about, have worked on myself, and as you know, that was established. We're so glad to see that the governor has included $35.3 million to increase the funding for the SIF, and it's been very effective so far. As you also know, under the statute that was created, that there is a fair split between the funding, so 60% in urban areas, but that's not just New York City, it's also for upstate cities, and 40% for the rural areas. And there's been some great projects so far, which is wonderful, and I want to congratulate you on that. One of the questions I had, though, it seems like a lot of the funding so far has gone towards some of the larger projects, and again, they're great, great projects. But I was wondering if there would be any consideration moving forward, some of the smaller projects too, you know, mixing in a few more of those just to get maybe a more fair distribution between those types of issues. Because, you know, there are a lot of smaller projects that are very worthy also.
I agree. I think particularly in the rural areas, rural parts of New York, outside New York City, size is no indication of the impact on a community. And I know that our staff appreciates that. You know, the early years, the first couple of years, I guess the first year of SIF has been, as you said, a resounding success, and we're delighted to be able to double down. The demand for that program is very, very high. And I think that, you know, the more mix of projects we get, the better, geographically, in terms of size. We look for impact, not for size.
But I do think, you know, just looking at some of the smaller projects too, they can have, in a small community,
Absolutely.
that impact can be huge, even though it's a small project. So I would just like for you to take that into consideration. And again, we're thrilled about it. The mixed use has been phenomenal, because not just meeting affordable housing needs, but also meeting other economic needs in the community. And again, it's that revitalization that we're all working towards. So congratulations on that, and look forward to seeing how things develop.